All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience, tech. Not my skill set. Okay. Hello and welcome to the Women Resisting US Imperialism panel. My name is Layla. I'm a member of the Black Alliance for Peace. The No War on Venezuela Coalition was formed after a national call that arose for anti-war, anti-imperialist, and pro-peace organizations, activists, and individuals to stand in opposition to the impending war on Venezuela. In late October, this brought together a variety of different organizations in the Atlanta area who understood that U.S. aggression against Venezuela is a part of a larger part of U.S. domination around the world. The kidnapping of the president of Venezuela, the starvation of Cuba, the bombing of children in Iran, and the genocide in Palestine are all part of the same struggle against U.S. imperialism. Tonight, in honor of International Working Class Women's Day, we are bringing together 4 women from Cuba, Venezuela, and the United States to join us remotely for a discussion on the role of women in revolutionary struggles against U.S. imperialism. To have better clarity and understanding of what working class people around the world are struggling against, the conditions on the ground, and what we can do to grow the anti-imperialist struggle here in the belly of the beast. Now, all of these incredible women have done such incredible work, and I can give a long, extensive bios to their background. But speaking with another incredible woman today, Diane, the president of the board here at WRFG, said it best: what is most important, that they are still a part of the struggle today. So briefly, I'm going to begin with Elizabeth Raven. Elizabeth Raven worked in Cesar Chavez's government as a general director of higher education, where she was second in charge of a team that created the new Bolivarian universities around the country. Jacqueline Luqman is the coordinating committee chair of the Black Alliance for Peace, an anti-war, anti-imperialist, pro-peace organization working to revitalize the Black radical tradition. Rabia Marquez Silva is the executive director for the International Summit for the Anti-Imperialist Africans and Afro-Descendants of Venezuela. And Gabriella Castillo is a diplomat of the Cuban Embassy in Washington, D.C. So everyone is going to take a chance to kind of speak around a variety of topics, but I'm going to begin with Gabriella. Can you describe the severity of the conditions in Cuba imposed by U.S. imperialism, and also the resilience and determination of the Cuban people? How did you become a diplomat, and what are the challenges of your work? If you can come off mute.
Okay. Y'all can hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity of being here today. I'm not alone. With me is my colleague, Adrian Heredia, who is also working in the Embassy of Cuba right now. He's the latest addition to our team in the embassy, are in the network Solidarity with Cuba here in the United States. So we both like to sincerely thank you all for organizing this gathering today and for your continued commitment to solidarity with the people of Cuba. So our purpose today is to share a clear and honest perspective on the most recent developments in relations between Cuba and the United States and how these policies impacting women and girls, and to talk to you about the new executive order 6. For Cuba, this has marked the beginning of a new and deeply concerning phase of pressure against the country, because this is not an isolated action. It is part of a systemic strategy aimed at limiting our sovereignty and also affecting our economy and creating hardship for the Cuban families entirely. And we must understand something that is very important at this point, which is that in times of crisis and economic pressure, inequalities deepen and women and girls are affected the most in this kind of situations. And this is not accidental. It reflects structural realities when women often occupy the more vulnerable positions in this kind of situations. And yet, even in these conditions, Cuban women continue to rise and to, and to give to the society even in this current situation. We are not passive participants of the Cuban revolutionary process. We have never been. We are strong political actors in our society. We have been protagonists in building, defending, and transforming our society. And over the time, also, Cuban women have claimed spaces that were historically denied to us before 1959. So today we are present in decision-making, in institutions, in diplomacy as myself, You were asking how I became a diplomat. Well, my professional career is general history in the University of Havana. And then I did a postgraduate studies on foreign affairs in the Institute of Foreign Relations in Cuba. And that is how I became a diplomat. My entire career as a diplomat is not that long. I've been only in this career for 5 years, but I've been working since the beginning in the division of the United States in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, and a particular thing on diplomacy and on many other professional careers in Cuba is that we, the women, are majority in my country. So we are also in science, we are leading education, in the economy, and all the things that we have achieved over the year are not simple concessions made by the revolutionary process, but as is a result of a conscious struggle that was led from the beginning of the revolution, but even before that, when women also participate in the fights and in the struggle in order to achieve the revolutionary victory in 1959. Of us in the society does not weaken, it strengthens because it becomes more and more important. We are leading in defending our sovereignty right now in the country, which has been under attack by this for more than 60 years, but even more with these recent measures. We are leading in social justice, and our rights are also a responsibility that we fully embrace in this situation. That is why we speak, when we speak about Cuban women, we have to refer as a revolution inside a revolution, because we are transforming not only our living conditions, but also the structures of power themselves. So let me turn back to the current context that we are facing right now in Cuba. We are living in a particularly complex international moment around the world, where global power dynamics are becoming more and more aggressive. We have saw what happened in Venezuela. We are seeing what happens in Iran. We are seeing what's happening in Cuba. And in our region, in particular, what they call the Western Hemisphere, right now it has turned more and more uh, obvious that they are turning back to old doctrines like the Monroe doctrines, that the idea of the Latin American, the Caribbean are sphere of influence where interference and pressure are just justified. So today we see this expressed through unilateral sanctions, economic blockades like the one that Cuba has been suffering for more than 60 years, disinformation campaigns, which is something that my country has suffered even from the beginning of the revolution, and attempts at diplomatic isolation, and all justified under this narrative of security or protecting democracy. But in reality, what is being pursued is the limitation of sovereignty and the obstruction of independent development in my country and in general in our region. And this is the context in which the January 29 executive order must be understood. In simple terms, the order labels my country as a threat, declares that as my country is a threat, it is a national emergency for the United States, imposes indirect sanctions, including pressure on countries that sell oil to Cuba, and expands the power of US institutions to enforce these measures. In short, is a tool that is designed to intensify economic pressure and restrict even international cooperation with Cuba in this moment. This is why we describe the situation as an energy blockade. The targeting of fuel shipments is not new. It has been an ongoing target for years, but this measure escalates this particular issue even further by threatening sanctions on any country or company that sells oil to Cuba. It creates fear among the suppliers, and as a result, many choose not to sell this so needed commodity for us. This has very concrete consequences on our people. It disrupts electricity generation. We are facing blackouts of more than 20 hours in the country, in the city of Havana. I've been talking with some friends that tell me that they have electricity for 3 hours during the day and 3 hours during the night. Imagine living in those conditions. Affects, of course, transportation, affects food distribution in the country, and undermines healthcare services. My country is well known for protecting healthcare services as a human right, and right now that is also under attack. Even if we are doing enormous efforts in order to provide those very needed services for our people. And today, Cuba has not received oil shipments since December 2025. We have the financial capacity to buy the fuel, but because of this new executive order, we are prevented from doing so. And this can be described as an economic warfare, which is what the blockade is, an economic war. It is not abstract. It is directly impacts daily life of the Cuban people, as I was trying to describe, and it constitutes a form of collective punishment against the country and against the people. So, talking about specifically about the human impact on this, I have some numbers for you. Imagine that right now, because of the instability of the power grid in the country and the instability of the electricity supply, we had to postpone surgeries in the country in order to prioritize those that were urgent. That means that right now Cuba has a list of more than 90,000 patients waiting for surgery in the country, and inside this number there are 11,000 children waiting for surgery in the country. Also, we have more than 30,000 children that have experienced delay in vaccination because of the fuel shortage. We have the vaccines, but the problem is that those vaccines need to be refrigerated, and because of the lack of electricity and because of the instability in the supply of electricity, this becomes very difficult. Also, we have 16,000 patients that require radiotherapy and nearly 3,000 patients that depend on dialysis. And both of these services depend on a stable electricity grid that we don't have right now. And in this case, and since we are in Women's Month, I'm going to talk about these numbers directly speaking about women. We have 80% of the maternal and child health supplies must be imported in my country. But those supplies, most of them, remember that Cuba cannot buy anything that had more than 10% of American component, or even faces difficulties in order to make money transactions in order to buy those supplies for women, because we are included in the list of state sponsors of terrorism. So we have difficulties in obtaining 80% of the maternal and child health supplies for the country. Also, more than half of essential medicines for women face delays and shortages because of the inclusion of Cuba in the state sponsor of terrorism list. As well, we have 10,000 women that require cancer treatment, and they are facing difficulties in the supply of this treatment because many of these medicines are, subjected to U.S. sanctions against Cuba. So this is not something that is theoretical. It's not something that is merely political. This is a daily reality of our people. So, but something that is very important, and yet despite all of this that I was describing, Cuba is not a country that is collapsing. Our response has been resilience, has been organization at this point. For more than 60 years, the Cuban people have faced immense pressure because of the blockade, and still we continue to defend what we have built: education, healthcare, equality, sovereignty. And I want to state, and I know that you know this, but I wanted to state it anyway, that Cuba is not a threat to the United States. It's not a threat to the United States people. It's not a threat to the United States government. It has never been. And Cuba also in this context is not alone. Across the world and here in the United States, there are voices of solidarity, voices of conscience, voices that understand that this policy is highly unjust, because this is not only a dialogue between governments. This has become more than that over the years. It is a dialogue between peoples, and I think that events like this are a very good demonstration of what it is. So thank you very much. I hope to hear your questions about all what is happening in the country.
Thank you. Do we want to give Adrian a moment to speak as well, to follow that? Adrian, were you just here in support?
Adrian is here in support, and he's also going to help me to answer the questions that you may have today. But I think he can say hello.
Since Gabriella allowed me, I will say hello.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity. We are glad to be here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that really concise and in-depth understanding of what's happening in the ground in Cuba and the resiliency that many of us can look to the Cuban people for as we organize here against US imperialism. Next, I'd like to go to Elizabeth Raven. If you don't mind kind of discussing your role in creating and implementing revolutionary curricula in Chavez's government, discussing how women's participation in education changed after the Bolivarian Revolution, and discuss the role of women in the Venezuelan government before and after the revolution. And more broadly, the role of women in the aspect of the Bolivarian Revolution. If you could come off mute.
Oh,
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. First, thank you very much for inviting me to this. I've seen how you defend Venezuela against the United States. I appreciate that very much. I actually am in Substack to do that, to tell people, I mean, who we are, what's the reality, and so I thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna answer first the second part because I think it's very important to know the context. We were, before Hugo Chavez won his first election, we were pretty much a colony of the United States. They didn't need at the time to attack us, or they didn't need sanctions because our governments, they wanted to be a colony. So it was perfect. They didn't even have to spend money to subjugate us. But then Chavez came. Before Chavez, I was part of the minority. I mean, I'm a socialist. I've been a socialist my whole life. But we were like 9% of the vote every time. We were dominated by propaganda. So, of course, socialism was like a monster, and capitalism was the best. So, middle class here, they were to the United States only because they had the money to buy things, and they didn't even want to like know the country. It was just Disney World and malls. So we were like very consumist. We were like the 51 states of the United States, actually, at the time, without the benefits, of course. When Chavez came, the first thing he did was to call a referendum to have a new constitution redacted, a real one. I mean, the constitutions before that one in 1998 were not actually redacted by the people or even voted. You know, it was like the elite of the politicians that made them. So for the first time, we voted for a constitution that we redacted. And from the very beginning, the presence of the women was like very important. So a lot of women were part of that reduction. So we can say that we have like a feminist constitution. Of course, that's ink on paper if you don't do something to apply that. But we did have, from the very beginning of that government, in 1999, we approved that on December. And we had a lot of protections. The Constitution stated that we were equal to men, and we had protection. I mean, the Constitution protected maternity and paternity too, because it's like the same for both sides. And we had a special articles about violence against women. So the Constitution protected women from that. It even gave origin to a law for to comply with that constitution articles. We're supposed to have equal jobs rights or war rights. I don't know the correct word here, but and at least in the government, that's been happening. After that, the private sector is the most difficult in everywhere, which still is capitalist, and it's very difficult to make them comply with equal salary for women or that kind of thing. But in the government, we've had a very big participation. We've had what we call ministers. You call it secretaries of whatever at the government. We have had for years the head of the electoral organization was a woman, and she was substituted by a woman. And even now we have a president because she was the vice president. We haven't had an elected woman president. We haven't got there still, but we have a lot of presence of the woman in the government. We even have a law that force the parties to present equal number of candidates for, you can see, governors or mayors or the National Assembly. So we have a National Assembly with a lot of women too. So that's good, okay? There are things still happening because maybe because it's cultural, still some violence against women. It was worse on the pandemic, but still we have that. But the most presence of women is in what we call the communal government. We have a structure, like normal structure, like yours, governors, mayors, and things like that. But we have another structure, a parallel structure, which is a communal government. So every community have what we call communal council, and then groups of communal councils are integrated in what we call communes. So we have more than 49,000 so far communal councils and more than 5,000 communes. And we have every trimester, we have an election where these communal councils propose projects that they need to have done in their communities, and it is voted, in a general election. Every group of communal councils or every commune select by election their project, and those projects are executed by the communities. Okay, it's not the money goes to the community, to the commune. Okay, and they execute the project, and 80% of those communal councils are directed by women. So women are in power of the community solution of the problems. Okay. So in that context, when I worked in education, I worked in we call it at that time superior education. That was changed because it's not actually superior. It's like university education. So at that time, we had a huge problem. Is that even though we had free universities, good ones, they were not enough. So when Chavez started the government, we had 1 million kids, I mean 17, 18 years old, waiting and waiting for a place in a free university. So at the time, that was such a big problem that we had like protests every day of those students that wanted to go to the university and couldn't, and they didn't have the money to pay. So in that context, we had to do something. So the first thing, at first we tried to we asked the universities to have more students. They had the capacity to do it, but they didn't want to. Their autonomy was that big that they said no, even though the government was the one who put the money. It's like they could use the money however they wanted, so they just every year reduced the number of places, so there were not enough. So there were some what we call experimental universities, which doesn't have that autonomy. So we started there, like having more students in those universities, but it wasn't enough either. And we had a big problem is that universities were in main cities, like capital cities of states. Some states didn't have universities at all because they were like more rural or far from Caracas. So so we started what we call Misión Sucre, which is a program that has two specific characteristics. Okay, we made the curriculum of those careers. Were like many, we designed many careers. I can put an example like medicine because it was like the first one we approved, and the main characteristic was that it was very practical from the beginning. That happened every one of the the pension, but in the case of medicine, it meant that the students from the very beginning, like second semester, they were to the houses. Okay, they were trying because the way it worked was that how can I say this? The objective was that we needed a kind of medicine in this case that weren't reactive but proactive. Is we need to have less sick people. We don't need to have people who need to go to a surgery because we didn't take the problem before when it started. So the second characteristic of these programs was that they were municipal. It's like you have one university, it could be even in Caracas, but you built in every place very far, where no universities go, and you have their professors, and you have like classrooms, and then you transported them if they needed to go to labs or any infrastructure that you wouldn't like make it there because it's too expensive for a few students. So it meant that the university went to the people and not the opposite. The opposite was very bad for many towns because you had the students having to go to capitals, and they moved, and they just got out of the town and never went back. And those towns were going to be like poor forever because the professionals were just out and they never went back because they got used to the capital. So, and the other characteristic is that the program was very, it was designed, it was very practical. So it was designed in a way that every year of the 4 or 5 years, depending on of the one you were talking about, every year you had some knowledge and some expertise. So if your mother gets sick and you have to take care of her and you have to leave the university, you will have a diploma that allow you to do something, to work in something. Because I don't know how it's in the United States, but in the rest of the system, the educational system, you didn't know how to do anything until you were in the 8th semester, and then you started to learn things, professional things. All the previous time was very theoretical. Physics, mathematics, structural dynamics, statics, or whatever, depending on the topic. So that was the other thing. So it meant that after probably 4 years, we didn't have anymore the problem. Every student that graduated from high school had a place in some university. Could be a real, big university because they live very close, or maybe just this kind of arachnid that one university was covering a lot of towns. So, and in that, we already had this new constitution, these new laws. It's very important when you have an example. If you only see men in the Congress, you're a kid and you don't even think that you as a girl can be one day part of that. You don't see it because you need to, as a kid, you need to see things. You need to see examples. If you see a vice president, you can say, oh my God, that's what I want to do when I am older. So we have pretty much more women at the universities. Okay, still there are some areas where it's very difficult to have women. For example, my son, he graduated in the electrical engineering department, and it was 10-1. Only one woman and the rest were men. But if you went to civil engineering, you could have 60-40 in favor of women. So it depended on the profession. Well, said that, I can wait. Okay. I can tell you that it wasn't easy peasy. It was very soon the United States started meddling. Okay, they didn't like that. We decided that we were going to have more money for our oil. At that time, they just paid 10%. The rest was their money. So they were taking all the money of our oil. And Chavez stopped that. They didn't like it, of course. And in general, he took out the DEA and the CIA. And South Command had an office in our military base in Caracas, and he went out too. So, but while Chavez was in charge, he had such a big presence, that they didn't went frontal against him. It was more, I think they were waiting for him to you just lost an election, and he just had cancer. Many people here think that it was induced, that cancer. Well, that's conspiranoid, but yeah, some people think that. But anyway, as soon as Nicolas Maduro won the election, the next, well, he called his pupil, uh, everything went south. It's like, oh my God, this guy, okay, no, this, we will eat him. And they actually tried very hard. They started with the sanctions in 2015, 2015. Yeah, in 2015. And we went south very easily because we were very dependent of the oil. So as soon as we couldn't buy the replacement, as Cuba has the same problem with the sanctions, we had to have help from Iran, from China, from Russia, because they just came to help us like convert the oil fields to their technology, so we could put in work again our refineries. Or so we spent a lot of time without gasoline, and we had to buy that, even though we had huge refineries and very good ones. But it's like when an equipment failed, we didn't have the replacement, and we didn't make it because it was from the United States, the technology. So we were too used to import everything. We even started to not have food because we imported a lot of food. But if you can use the SWIFT system, you can pay for the food, you can buy the equipment, you can buy. We couldn't buy medicine either. We were importing medicine from India or Turkey, or those places that didn't care to buy. To sell things to us because they weren't so afraid of the United States. But it was very difficult because we couldn't. The thing is that the United States couldn't know that happened, and when the money leaves a trail, they know. So we needed to pay with cryptos and very shady methods. So that was, of course, corruption. When you can't control how the money is spent because it has to be very obscure so the United States doesn't know. And that took us to a lot of coups and color revolutions, and the opposition did everything they could, attempts of assassinations, you name it, everything. So it just took us to this event, because who is the people that asked for the bombing to Venezuela? It was the opposition in Miami. I'm not gonna say that we are like saints and they are the evil. They hated us and they still hate us. Oh, maybe we did something for that, okay? Because it was a negative spiral. It's like when you have a coup, then the reaction of the government is then we put laws to stop this from happening again, and then you have protests for like a year, and then you have to put people in jail, and that's a spiral. So I don't doubt that we did some things that we shouldn't have done. I can say that it was defensive, but because it was. But then they are outside the country for years, so they couldn't see everything that happened here. How we started producing our food, our medicine, our clothing, and we just could restart our oil production. So when this happened in January, these attacks, it was like the last attempt, because it's like they couldn't, because since we had oil, or we have oil, we were a little bit more independent. That's the problem with Cuba, is they depend a lot from us, from Mexico, and since we cannot, give them oil, they have this horrific situation. I wish we could. At this moment, we cannot, because we are under threat still, and what happened that day was very traumatizing. It's like we don't want that to happen again. We had never had a war since Bolivar, since the independence war from Spain, and that's a lot of time ago. And well, so we're here, like, navigating these waters. I think our president in charge, she's very smart. She is actually very, very smart. So she's like negotiating, and since this is an asymmetric war, like the one we have with the United States, they have all the military power, money. These sanctions that we don't call sanctions, we call coercive measures, unilateral coercive measures, because why are they sanctioning somebody else? I mean, some other country. That's absurd. But this asymmetric war only can be managed if you can create, like, competitive advantages, so the aggressor cannot touch you, because he will lose almost the same as you, or maybe more. Like now, in this moment, with this oil crisis, they need our oil more than January 3rd. Okay? So since they need that oil, it's like they can't attack us again easily, because they have to negotiate, so they have the oil. And we don't have a problem selling the oil to the United States. We've done that every time. We never stopped doing that. Only the last years, we needed the permission of, the guy in charge. It doesn't matter who was it. All the presidents were the same since Obama. And the thing is that now this war with Iran changed a lot. Like, the things, I even think that it will be better for Cuba, because it's not an easy war. So he's very, like, distracted with that. Yeah, sadly, because it's a horrible war. But we're trying. We have very good diplomatics, and we weren't heard before. It's like the diplomatic relationships were severed, but fatally severed. It's like we didn't have conversations at all. And at least now we're negotiating, so for us, it's something good that came from something really bad. And maybe we just need to be patient, because we have been, it's like we already know how to be patient. We've spent the last 27 years being patient, like trying to navigate these muddy waters with the United States. And what he didn't know is that in those 20 something years, the new generation would be even more revolutionary, because it's like you attack a country and they will reunite. They will. We're now as a block. It's like the last polls say that 80% of the people living in Venezuela, of course, not outside, they support the new president, and they think things will get better, and we trust very much in what they are trying to do, even though we know that is under pressure. It's like the president has a gun on her head. She has to be very polite. She has to treat this thing in a very difficult way. And we still have this thing about having a president in a prison in the United States, and the legislator, that she's an elected legislator. I hate when people say the president and his wife. No, she's not a wife. Okay, she even married him 20 years after she lived with him, just because he was going to be a candidate for the presidency. And yeah, it's like people like to have a couple who were married, but she is an elected legislator from the National Assembly, and she's a lawyer, and she's the one that took Hugo Chavez out of prison at the moment. So we just hope. The one thing that I wish more is to be able to give again oil to Cuba, because we are like brother and sisters. It's like we're siblings. We've been helping each other along all these 20 something years. So, well, so that's pretty much. I don't know what you can have questions, of course. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was really informative, and just for everyone here to know, we are going to get into a Q&A at the end, but we're going to go ahead and go to Jacqueline Lukman, who recently took a trip to Venezuela, actually. Do you mind sharing a report on like what lessons that you took from that time there, and what we here in the Imperial Core could learn from Venezuela?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your I loved hearing the perspective. Yet another perspective from someone in Venezuela about Venezuela right now, because what we're hearing, what we're seeing in the US is such garbage. And it's very difficult for us to navigate the truth from the lies, because we're being told that interim President Rodriguez is right in line with the U.S., which sounds like capitulation to us. And I'm trying to tell my comrades, calm down, shut up, to stop responding to that stuff. So I appreciate you making that clear, and thank you so much, Gabriella, for your voice as well, because as much as we are in solidarity with both Cuba and Venezuela and Haiti and so many other places, we in the US do not get the opportunity, many of us, to go to these places. I have been to Cuba, I have been to Venezuela. I hope to go again soon. This was my second trip to Venezuela, and I hope to go back to Cuba again very soon, as well as Nicaragua. Um, and it is important for us, particularly African people who are colonized domestically in the United States. This is the way
Yeah.
the Black Alliance for Peace sees ourselves. We understand ourselves to be domestically colonized, and our material conditions mirror the material conditions of colonized people in these countries and what I like to call our sister countries, Cuba, Venezuela, IAT. This is where our people are from. This is where our people are. So we need to see and connect with our people wherever we are. But we don't get a chance to do that because we are domestically colonized. So we're broke. I mean, that's just the truth. We're broke when we can't afford a plane ticket to go to Cuba. Most of us cannot afford airfare. And if we couldn't get the time off because most of us don't have jobs where we're allowed to have that much time off. That's paid time off for most of us, most working class and poor people in this country. The working situation is shift work, hourly work, not a lot of salary jobs, not a lot of benefits, not a lot of paid time off for sickness, let alone, a vacation. So a lot of working class and poor people who need to know there is an alternative. There's a better system than this in many places in the world. If this government would just leave people alone, other people could thrive and really, be beacons of true liberation and human rights for us. But we don't get the opportunity to come and see for ourselves. So my job really is, as an organizer, is when I get the opportunity to do that, my job is to come back and tell people what I've seen, what I was told, what I experienced. And I've done that over the past couple of weeks since I've been back. One of the things that we focused heavily on this trip was visiting the fisher communities, the fisher folk communities, and visiting the communes. And it struck me, it wasn't unusual, but it did strike me how much women are at the forefront of so much of all of that work. Of course, women are half the population. And in revolutionary societies, I've become used to seeing women in more prominent positions than what we would see here, where we see here most of the women in positions of power, well, they're imperialists because you have to be, to get elected in this country. You can't be a socialist for real. And you can be a democratic
Yeah, yeah.
socialist a little bit, you know and get elected to office in this country. But you cannot be a socialist and you cannot be a communist and get elected. You can't get elected dog catcher and calling yourself a socialist and communist in this country. So the women in leadership here are, regardless of party, they are imperialists to the core. They are warmongers. They are very much supportive of the patriarchy, even though many of the women will say differently. And they are not really interested in having a struggle for true women's liberation that confronts the foundation of patriarchal thinking, which is colonization. So when I go to places like Venezuela and Cuba and I see these conversations being had and I see these struggles being led by women in public, in organization, in nonprofits, which are a different thing in these countries than they are in the United States. Here, you have to stay away from nonprofits because nonprofits are an extension of the state. They are fully captured by the state. That is something that we have to, right along with the police and the military. We in the United States have to look at these institutions that exist in other countries that are revolutionary from a very different perspective from what we are used to, right? Because we don't trust the police here and we shouldn't, right? Because the police are very much into extrajudicial killings of people who look like all of us. But the police in Venezuela, that's a slightly different, And then
Yeah.
that was a very strange thing for me to go to the commemoration of the overturning of the 2002 coup in 2022 and go to the massive parade and see the military and the police right up front and the militias. And this is a celebration of people's liberation. And here I am from the US. I wouldn't want to be in any parade with any police. So it's a very coming from a society that is very individualistic, that is very lip service focused. They'll say the right words to get the attention of the people, but their actions don't line up with the words. That they'll catch what's trending and they'll use the trending language to get people's consent, to get them to sign on, and then it won't do anything other than take the people's money. That's what we're used to in this country. And for women and working class and poor women in particular, that is that's a landmine. That's just a landmine that keeps particularly racialized women, African descended women, indigenous, First Nations, other immigrant women on the absolute bottom of the economic, of the educational, of the housing, of the everything. I mean, childbirth now it is being turned into another weapon of controlling women's bodies, where there have been at least two instances recently where hospitals have forced women in active labor to get on a Zoom call to argue why the hospital should not force these women to have a C-section. While they are in labor, they are forced to get on and talk to a bunch of judges, argue their case for this is happening right now in this country. So when I go to Venezuela, I go to Cuba and I see, yeah, there are economic struggles, but I also understand the sanctions. I also understand the imperialist aggression. I also understand the attacks coordinated by the CIA and the NED and all of these alphabet agencies from the US through the diasporic groups that want to destroy the revolution. I take all of that with me and I contextualize the material conditions that might look, I guess, physically less than optimal than what we're used to in the United States. But I also look at that and look at what women in Venezuela and Cuba and these other countries, what they have that we don't. And support from the state is one. Dignity and self-determination, human rights are another. Healthcare, education, housing. And the guarantee that the state will not ravage the environment and cause unnecessary sickness and death among their families and their children's and their children and destroy the environment to the point where they can't support their families. We don't have that in the United States. We have the illusion of freedom. We have neoliberal feminism that prioritizes individualistic things like self-care. Everybody gets a bath bomb and that's going to make everything great. But there are I won't say there are no. There are little conversations about the things that you all are talking about collective women's uplift, collective family care, collective access to all women, all people who identify as women, all families that are in any kind of iteration. How are they being supported by society? So when I go to Venezuela and I go to places like the Fisher Village on the Caribbean coast, and I see that there are as many women in those boats as there are men, fishing, or women processing what the fishers are bringing in, women creating the products that are sold to make money for the community, literally making the spreads and the seafood dishes that are sold through the compa program that I had the shark topping. It was delicious. I didn't think I would put shark in my mouth, but I did, and I'm glad I did because it was delicious. But I'm seeing Also in the communes, women working alongside men, not only in what in the US, and I'm sure what the former colonizers imposed on your countries before you kicked them out, women's work. We visited El Panal and talked to the manager of the shop or the owner of the shop where they produce the clothes for the schools, for the students. And the manager was asked, do you have, how many people do you have working here making the garments, and are there women in there, or are they mostly women? And he's like, no, it's not mostly women. I work here, and several men work here. That this is not what we do here. This. So it is, even in going to Venezuela in this period of absolute horror, just being in the country among the people, feeling the stress that you can still feel, but also feeling this kind of, I don't know how to describe it other than revolutionary hope, that people still are holding on to what they've won. They're holding on to what they've built. They know they are still under threat. They're trusting their government, but they are on guard and they are vigilant. But they have not stopped being loving, kind, welcoming, accepting, just beautiful people, and asking us to come back and tell people in the US, we're not your enemy. We do not want anything other than to live in peace with the rest of the world. There is a level of humanity among the people of these countries, Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, Nicaragua, China. I haven't been to Russia yet, but I'm going to try to go. I've been to China. I can say the same thing about them. And I'm beginning to think this is true of a lot of revolutionary countries, or at least countries that are engaged in anti-colonial, anti-imperialist struggle in one way. In some way, there is a level of humanity among people who are not trapped in the capitalist clutches that we in the United States are still aspiring to. And I think that's just the truth. On this delegation in Venezuela, I was with a large contingent of a mostly white anti-war um, organization, a woman-led anti-war organization here, which I have a great deal of respect for. They do fantastic work. But I was the only Black person on the delegation, which in 2026, why that's still happening, I don't know. But here we are. Um, so I'm on the delegation, and we're doing the going to visiting places and talking to people and throughout Venezuela, and the people are saying the same thing over and over again. Most Americans don't want this war. Most Americans want peace, and that it started to get on my nerves because I know that's not true. Because if it were true, we wouldn't be at war. If it were true that most Americans didn't want war against Cuba, against Venezuela, against anybody, against Iran, most Americans would be out in the streets today and every day, but that has not happened. Because the truth is that most Americans in the United States, including a lot of American women and including a lot of racialized, oppressed, colonized people in the United States, are very, very much indoctrinated into American exceptionalism, capitalist individualism, and very much isolated individual, um, uh, I don't know what to call it. Just it's all about me, and anything that doesn't directly impact me and mine, I don't care. That really is, and I hate to say it, and particularly at this moment in the history of humanity, I think it bothers me more thinking that there are people around the world wondering when the Americans are going to get our stuff together. I That thought bothers me more than, busting people's bubble and telling you, please don't hold your breath. There are some of us, there are absolutely some of us who will give everything we have to deal the final blow to this empire so that we all can live free. Absolutely. That's why BAP exists, because this organization, nothing like it existed since the late 60s or 70s, really, since the Black Power movement, the civil rights movement, the Black liberation movement. This kind of thing didn't exist in the modern era, where Black radical organizing, Black radical anti-capitalist politics, and international solidarity are all focused on and connected to all of the struggles that impact us all. Um, but in the establishment of this formation and in the expansion of the work that we do, that has given us the opportunities, people like me, because I'm just a chick from Southeast DC. There's nothing, I'm not, I'm just a chick from Southeast DC who happens to hate capitalism and who found some people who I agreed with, who I decided, my late husband and I decided, hey, we have to do something. Let's do something with these folks. And they provided the opportunity for somebody like me to visit Venezuela, to visit Cuba, to visit China, and to see that people are doing amazing, beautiful human things for the sake of humanity, just because it is the right thing to do. And we don't have to live the way we do in this country. We don't. But being an organizer also means that I have to tell the truth about the material conditions that we exist in. Because we cannot organize to win if we're not honest about the landscape we have and what our forces really are and who they really are. So while I come back and tell people here pretty much exactly what you said, Elizabeth, and exactly what you said, Gabriella. Our job is to defeat this empire from the inside. Our job is not to psychoanalyze or agree with or argue with the state about what they say about Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua and other countries. Our job is to be in solidarity with them, follow their lead in what they need from us. If we're confused about what the state says about Venezuela, we need to keep our mouths shut and ask Venezuelans, hey, what's going on here? Did you see this? Did you hear this? What's going on here? If we want to know what's going on in Cuba, we need to talk to Cubans about what's going on in Cuba. It's the same thing everywhere, but our job is, when we do get this information, to come back and tell our people, like what I've been doing. And they have not liked hearing it. They have not liked hearing me, me telling them, I know what you're hearing on the news. Please stop responding to it, because number one, it's probably not true. Number two, it's definitely propaganda to make you think that the Venezuelans have capitulated. Just don't respond. Leave it alone. And let's wait until this plays out and the Venezuelans tell us what's going on. That's, patience is difficult for us. We live in a very microwave society here. Everything is instant. We expect everything right now. And because we're American, we expect that when we ask for stuff, everybody's just supposed to just run and give us what we want. And we are having to organize that American exceptionalism out of ourselves, even. So that when I come back from Venezuela and Cuba and these other countries, I'm not talking about what Jackie felt. I'm talking about what the people of Venezuela said, did, what happened to them, what they want you to know. And as much as I have learned in doing it, and particularly this last trip to Venezuela, as much as it has absolutely reaffirmed my hope in humanity, it has also caused me to think much more soberly about how I talk about what I do and why I do it. Because as much misinformation and confusion and lies as there are out there about our brothers and sisters fighting this beast, what we don't need to do is contribute to the confusion. And that's a struggle that we are having to deal with in this country, even among the so-called left. Because as we've seen, there's a whole lot of pro-imperialist perspectives on the left, particularly about Iran and Maduro. Oh, well, Maduro was a dictator. Who told you that? The
Yeah.
dictator in the White House? The the crystal fascist in the White House told you that Nicholas okay. So this is the way I kind of have the conversations with folks in BAP and even my own family members about things that they hear and that they see, that I encountered myself when I went to Venezuela. And I presented these things to people in Venezuela, and they said, what? Like I told some people in one of the organizations, and I'll end here. I told two of the sisters in El Panel commune, because they were asking me, what is the organizing among Africans like? We would love to see more Africans here because we would love for them to see the communes. And I'm like, yeah, we've got to know how the communes work. I think this is fabulous. We're having a great conversation, and they're asking, what is the organizing like among Africans in the US? What about the new Black Panther Party? Because there was, this group, I think in New York, they called themselves the new Black Panther Party. They had, weapons, and they're out. And of course that goes viral, the video. They're not connected to anything. So I unfortunately had to convey the bad news to them that yeah, they're not actually the Black Panther. No, that's not. And this is really what's going on on the left in the US. There's a lot of confusion. There's a whole bunch of CIA leftists who agree with the state on, who's a dictator and who deserves to be cooed and all this, that, and the third. But there's also this weird thing among Africans where some of us, because we're so committed to getting reparations, that we have chosen to identify as American, and some of those folks believe that they're not African at all. They have no connections to Africa. And if you tell them they're African, they will cuss you out. And they are only interested in reparations. They are Americans. They are American descendant of and I'm explaining this to the two sisters in and they're looking at me like, what? They are really the looks on their faces were really very like, what language is she speaking? This makes no sense. and and it was heartbreaking for me on one hand, because it is heartbreaking to admit that the long history of liberation struggle that we, particularly Africans, working class and poor Africans, particularly African women, have in this country has kind of melted away under all of this capitalist indoctrination and the separation of us from Africa and the diaspora, and the pursuit of individual capitalist stability. Some degree of it has infected people's consciousness to the point that they've literally accepted that if this is the only way I'm going to get my crumbs, then I'll take it. That's pretty depressing for me, because what does that say about that legacy of Black radical organizing? But on the other hand, I'm still here. We're still here. BAP is here. And we're not the only organization. There are other revolutionary radical African organizations who are trying. We are doing our best to organize and reach our people and organize us into some kind of a mass where we can strike that final decisive blow to the beating heart of empire, while you all are struggling against its flailings on the outside. But I readily admit that you are the advanced cadre. That is just the truth. The people in the global South that have waged the uncompromising and unending battle against imperialism are the advanced cadre. We are catching up. And we're catching up because we are in the beating heart of imperialism. And at one point, we were the advanced cadre, of the oppressed masses here. The state realized that. The state neutralized us to the degree that they thought they had eliminated us, but they couldn't take us all out. That's why we're still here. So, in that, I do have hope. As bleak as it may seem today, I also remember that there is not a revolution on the face of the earth that has ever been successful, that has been carried out by a majority of the people who need to be freed. That's never been the case. Every revolution has always been carried out by a small segment. The initial phases of the revolution have always been carried out by a small segment of the oppressed people. And then when the first battles are won, then everybody else gets involved. That's fine. That's okay. That's a charge we'll take. We'll take that charge. But we in the Black Alliance for Peace, we in the revolutionary core of African organizers, African revolutionary organizers in this country, we understand that we are fighting an uphill battle, but we also commit our lives to this battle, just like our ancestors did, just like you have. And we intend to fight until we are all free. And we thank you. We absolutely thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your example. Because if it were not for you giving us the example, a lot of us would not know where we should turn. So I'll end with that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody give it one more time for all of our speakers. That was really important. Thank you so much. This is really enlightening. I feel honestly very inspired. I don't know about y'all in this room. There was a lot of There was a lot of
I'm tearing up.
a lot of clapping.
I'm tearing up.
Oh, we've got tears. This has been really, really, really empowering and really beautiful. And I know I have questions, and I'm sure everybody here has a lot of questions. People who are on the Zoom also
I'm
have
gonna
questions.
look on there.
So, and just for our speakers, you can't fully encompass exactly how many people are in the room, but we've got a full room. We've got over, I would say, 30 people in here right
So we
now.
got 35, I think.
35 folks, and then close to 20 on the Zoom. So that's really, really thank you all for coming out here. Give it up for yourselves. Thank you so much. Continuing to popularize the anti-imperialist struggle, to bring in solidarity with Cuba, with Venezuela, with Iran, and with all the global South people working to fight against US imperialism. So I think let's just start within the room. For anybody who wants to kind of come up and have a question, feel free to come take the mic and ask our speakers. I would like to start. I'm gonna take my moderating power. I think the communes are fascinating, and I am super interested in learning from Venezuela around these communes. So my question is kind of, it's hard for me to even really picture how they operate and what they look like. So I'm wondering if you could give me like an overview of like how the communes work.
Okay. Well, let's say you have like a town, and people decided to have communal councils, so they just, and there is even a legal, process to register this. Okay. So, because we have a law, like the Congress passed a law for the communes. So there are things like, it's easy for the people to say, okay, we have a struggle here. Okay. For example, we used to produce this from, any produce they had, I'm thinking about the rural areas. It is everywhere, but so they realize that individually they couldn't solve the problems that they had in the community. So before the communes, what happened was like this mayor, they just thought that you needed to pave a street. That's the problem of that community. And it turned out that it wasn't, but they didn't have the power to ask for what they really needed. So when this starts, they start like meeting and having, this organization. And these meetings are fabulous because it's like you see the people talking about what do we need. We don't need the street paved. No, we need water because the pump is broken since like the last year or 2 years ago. And maybe the friends of the mayor, they don't know anything about pumps. They don't import pumps or fixed pumps or anything like that. They just have friends who do pavements. So it's like you don't know how much money has been spent in my country in streets that are repaired and repaired again and again, even though they are in good shape, and that's money that could go to a better place. So you can have, if you realize that together you can ask for the solution of your problem, of the one that you really have, then you start like seeing the benefit of having a communal organization instead of everyone individually trying to, like survive. So you can have your problem might be a service that is not working and the government hasn't noticed that it has to solve it. Or your problem could be that your town needs to produce something, to make something, to sell, to have money, because the only other option is to go to live in a favela or rancho, how is what we call it here, in a place in a pretty bad conditions but close to the capital, and then you have a job that you don't like, but it's the only way. But if you want to stay in your community because you like that community, because you like to live there, then this organization helps you to um, have the possibility to stay, because now you know that you can solve the problems. So there are many problems. I work in a government, so I work for the government, and sometimes you are deciding in a table in a room the lives of people which are very far away without even consulting them. So now with this organization and these elections that we have periodically every 3 months, then people say, okay, I need this. And maybe you can agree or maybe not. If you agree, it's very easy, but maybe 5 communities of the same commune, they want different projects. So that's the election for. It's like, okay, we will have an election and decide voting which is more important, because we couldn't have a consensual decision in the meetings. And then you have the 2 first the projects that win this election in each commune, they are executed. The government has the obligation of giving the money to these people, and they just need to learn how to organize themselves. It's like, it's not, and of course, there is a lot of help from the government, because you have, for example, we have the university of the communes. So there you can go and learn how to do a project, or how to make a budget, or how to execute it, how you organize the people. And it goes better on time because you can realize too that, oh, we are like 5 communes here in this city, and we're gonna do pretty much something similar. So why don't we buy together the things we need, and it will be cheaper because you will buy in bulk, not like small thing. And well, then it's a matter of trial and error. I think they were learning, and actually the success has been very, very, very good because it's like 90 or 95% of the projects they go, and I mean they are executed with the money that the people received, and sometimes they even have like some money to do something else, and it can go to specific things like people in this town, when the rain comes, their roofs are in bad shape and they have water inside the house. So they just put a project and say, okay, we need to repair all the roofs of this commune. And they do that because in that community, maybe there is somebody who knows how to do that and has done it for people who pays. So it's I think it's a very good experiment, and you cannot force people to work together if they come from individualism, but if they realize that there is something good about it, they just do it, and the solidarity becomes like the next step.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I was,
Yeah.
answering your question.
I just want to say, if y'all are curious about the communes, Resistance Film, one of the groups that is organizing this event will be showing 2 short films about
Resistance
the
Cinema.
communes in Venezuela. You said
Resistance Cinema.
Resistance Cinema.
We don't
My
have the
apologies.
date set yet, but it'll be in April.
So it'll be in April.
Okay.
Set the date, and I just want to I'll mention this again at the end. There are sign-up sheets where you can get more information about any events that we, Resistance Cinema, and the Venezuela Solidarity Coalition can do. So I think we will be going to more questions. Thank you for that.
Diane has.
Yes.
Gabriella, there have been a number of efforts that are underway now, and even some of our people here in Atlanta have arrived in Cuba with various aid contingents. So there's a plane, there's a ship or a boat, there's individuals that are putting stuff in their luggage. Could you talk, and I mean, from the standpoint of being able to supply the needed medicines to the whole population, this is not how it's going to work. But I do want to ask your opinion about the efficacy and the solidarity that it means to the Cuban people for these aid shipments, as the many ways that are happening to be taking place. And thank you so much for being on the program again. I think this is at least your 3rd time talking to people here in Atlanta, so thank you.
Yay. Thank you, Diane, for your question. So first of all, in this moment, the solidarity that we have received from the United States and from all around the world has been very important because it has stated that we're not alone despite the hostilities that we're facing right now. We have received a lot of help coming from different countries, highlighting the several shipments from Mexico with solidarity aid for Cuba, fundraisings for Cuba, also solidarity statements, letters that have been sent to the government of the United States particularly one here in the United States. I think the name was Let Cuba Live, that so far has around 200, 300 signs right now from council members, assembly members, academics, scientists, artists, influencers, many people. Also, we have seen statements even coming from Congress opposing what is happening right now regarding this blockade of energy against Cuba after the executive order. And specifically and very special in this moment is that we are receiving in Cuba different delegations as part of something named Convoy Nuestra America, Convoy Our America, that has people from the United States, different groups from the United States, but also from Europe, also from Africa, also from Asia, coming to Cuba, from all around the world, coming to Cuba with solidarity aid like solar panels, like medicine, like cans of food, anything that they thought was, helpful in this moment, which doesn't solve the situation, as you well said, but it brings great help to the Cuban people and to the Cuban Revolution in this moment, which is the same thing. And I think it's not only the material help itself what is important in this moment, it's also the fact that they are in the ground, that they are in Cuba, and they are witnessing what is happening. They are witnessing the challenges that we are facing right now, but they are also seeing the resistance of the people in Cuba, and they are able to report what they're seeing in the ground in Cuba, and visiting hospitals and visiting schools and working in the fields with the Cuban farmers in this moment. So this is very important. It has a great value under this situation that we have right now. I don't know if Adrian wants to add something about this. I don't know. Adrian, can you hear me?
Adrian, can you hear us?
I don't know.
Yes,
Yes, he's there.
yes. I mean, so regarding solidarity that we have been seeing, as Gabriela was saying, for our point of view, more than the material aid is the political demonstration that there is people against this policy. There is people who actually understand that this is not about political feelings. It's regarding humanity. It's regarding social justice. It's regarding the right to our people to self-determination and the right to our people to write our own future in our own terms, not by pressure, not by economic warfare. So there is people who understand that. There is people who actually understand that this is not fair. This is not the way the things should do. The way they have to show those solidarity is different in every case. So there is people actually making demonstrations around the world. There's people going to Cuba. There's people sending donations. And for Cuba, there is not small initiative. For Cuba, every initiative is well received, and it's an example of we are in the right side of the history. We know that there is people who actually feel that Cuba is an example for many of them. So we are not giving up in our right to have our independence, our sovereignty, our right to self-determination. No, that's what I can say.
Thank you so much. Let's see, are there any more questions from the audience at this moment? Anybody have any questions? Oh.
Thank you to all of our speakers for your bravery and generosity with us today. I've been disturbed by the news of the survivors of sexual violence through Cesar Chavez. And just the fact that they've felt they've had to be silent for so long and really survive in a lonely way. And I think there's a lot of pressure on women, especially in like populist movements, working people's movements, movements of the oppressed and marginalized to just kind of suffer silently in these ways. And I wonder if there's a way to operate differently in a way that acknowledges these realities, but furthers the strength of women and of all people together. I'd like an international perspective on that, if you don't mention.
I didn't know if that was directed to anybody in particular. But I would just say that if you are in organization, you should have a process for handling any and every internal issue. And there should never, ever be an internal issue that is so difficult and you know, potentially destructive or whatever that you wouldn't confront it. This is I think an issue that I don't want to because I kind of see what the US media is doing with this story. Even though the story needs to be told, the truth needs to be told, absolutely. The timing of it coming out begs some questions because we've got a whole Congress and a bunch of very rich, very white people in power in countries all over the West who are involved in this Epstein cabal thing that's been going on for decades that what two people have been kind of held accountable for, and we know there are hundreds if not thousands involved in that. And then now there's this enormous pivot to this issue of the question of sexual assault on the left. No, there's not a problem with sexual assault on the left. There's a problem with predation in colonial ideology. That's the problem. And we have to understand that we are all indoctrinated with that colonial because we've all been colonized. So we all have ideas about gender and relationship and even the role of children, whether they have rights or not, that we learn from colonized societies that we have to unlearn. So the fact that there are these issues in left spaces is not an indictment of the left as much as it's evidence that we're all colonized. How we handle these issues, however, that's where the indictment can come in. If there are no processes in place, and I mean written down, agreed to by the organization, adhered to religiously without exception, transparent, multiple, multi-layered, not just one person making the decision, but everybody needs transparency into the situation. However it's framed, these situations, these issues cannot be allowed to work themselves out. We can no longer tolerate whisper campaigns. Oh, I heard this one is doing so and this and no, if you hear that, you better tell somebody. You need to go, and if you hear that someone has done a thing, go and tell the person you heard it about. Talk about these things. If the person who it happened to is afraid and cannot talk about it, ask them if you can talk about it to somebody in authority on their behalf. Don't let someone suffer under this weight, under this false guilt that we know the patriarchy puts on them so that they don't, because they're trying to save the organization. They don't want to hurt the movement. The movement will be fine. Abusers need to be kicked out of the movement.
Right.
That's just it. I don't have any other answer for that because listen, I think we've all probably experienced some level of abuse in some kind of way in every aspect of our lives. I don't think that's something that's colonialism. That is colonialism. It is white supremacy. That is where it comes from. Indigenous people did not shape our societies this way. So we learned colonizing behavior where they destroyed our relationships that benefited our communities and the way we lived our lives and the way we developed ourselves and our communities and our families. They forced us to learn their messed up, backward, patriarchal, abusive way of basically just creating another generation of human beings to exploit. And now we're having to unlearn that. So I think, and I'll stop here, the ruthlessness with which they indoctrinated us, that needs to be the ruthlessness with which we root this out. Sometimes that might mean we are going to have to invite people out of our spaces, out of our organizations. That there's no getting around that. And we're going to have to be okay with being called all kinds of names and because we have to protect our people. And we in the US, on the other side of the collapse of this thing, we can't build a replica of what we have now. So I say this from the perspective of someone in the US. We have to stop being liberal about these kinds of issues, not just sexual assault, but racism, homo and transphobia, xenophobia. We have to stop being liberal about the way we address these things because the liberalism with which we kind of hope that these things will work out on their own, that's what creates these kinds of situations where there's a secret kept, well, two secrets kept for 60 years, and then it can be manipulated by the media for its own purposes to discredit the left all these years later. So let me shut up. I've spoken enough. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that amazing answer. Do we have any more questions? I also want to say in the chat, if you want to add any questions, we are also taking questions from the chat for the people who are online. Oh,
Oh,
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much to all the speakers. My name is Michaela, and I'm here with Code Pink. But one of my questions is for you, Jacqueline, and I just want to say, thank you for everything you said. But specifically, what is your message? And I guess like, how would you frame conversations? Because as an organizer and coming from an experience of racial justice and immigrant justice organizing, I often hear like when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to Venezuela, Cuba, all these international struggles, it's so often we hear, why aren't you focusing on what's going on here? Like why, what can we do about what's going on across the globe? How would you recommend framing, I guess, a response to this on why this international solidarity is so connected to what we're doing and who we are?
Well, if you go to the Black Alliance for Peace website, you'll see 87 pages of the long answer to that question, because every statement we put out about anything that happens in the world, we connect it to our struggles right here. So I don't care what the issue is. I don't care where the issue is, if it's in Sudan, if it's in Congo, if it's in Haiti, if it's in Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. We can connect every single one in Palestine. We can connect every single one of those issues to the material conditions we deal with right here. Let's just look at policing. Extrajudicial killings by the police of working class and poor African and indigenous and immigrant people in this country mirrors U.S. militarism carried out in Palestine through its proxy Israel, but it also mirrors the same kind of thing carried out in Haiti, the so-called criminal gangs. Where'd they get those guns from? There are no gun manufacturers in Haiti. So where are all those guns coming from? They're coming from the US, right? So that this all of this violence in Haiti, the criminal gangs, well, that same kind of situation is created in Haiti that the US government creates in our own occupied domestically colonized neighborhoods with the manufactured and enforced poverty that gives rise to intracommunal violence that then the state that created the conditions condemns, calling us a bunch of, super predators that need to be incarcerated. The situation in Congo, where you have resources that everyone needs, because we've all got these devices that require these resources, but it's the youngest and the most vulnerable who are the most exploited, and the corporations are making trillions of dollars off of that exploitation, mass slave labor of children, mass death in those mines. But Apple and Tim Cook and Elon Musk and Tesla make trillions. What happens to those people? How is that different from our situation with employment in any context in our communities where working class and poor people live? Sure, we can get what do you call them, gig jobs, because that's basically all that's left. We can get gig jobs with Uber and Lyft and Instacart and wherever, but contractors, not a salary, no benefits. If something happens to you, too bad, so sad. But the owners of Lyft and Uber, they make all of the money. So we can, every time there is an issue internationally that relates to US imperialism, capitalism, militarism, we absolutely do take the time to find the connections. How is what was done here connected to US foreign policy? We have not been unable to find a connection in anything that we have looked at, which we have just taken the information that our ancestors, Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois, Shirley Graham Du Bois, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, so many other people before them, Malcolm X, told us that you can't understand Palestine if you don't understand Mississippi. And if you don't understand Mississippi, you can't understand Palestine. It was true then. We are proving that it's true now. And this is what I said to you, this is literally what I tell everybody who says that to me. And I get the same thing too. So yes, that is exactly what we tell people.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. And just to further in on that point, just to localize it for us here in the state of Georgia, is anybody familiar with the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange?
Yes.
If you're not familiar, it's essentially a policing program where Georgia cops go to Israel to train in genocide and mass displacement tactics, and then come here to learn those skills and in their new cop cities that they just built, mind you. So they can, come out and massively displace working class people here, particularly as we have the World Cup that's coming here in the city of Atlanta. And as many folks know about gentrification that's happened here, large majority of Black folks in Atlanta cannot afford to live in the city of Atlanta, right? They've been displaced, they've been pushed out.
Okay.
Programs like Italy. So just to help localize it, and maybe when we do the documentary around the Venezuela communes, we can also talk about the School of Americas, which is here in the state of Georgia, where essentially people are trained to help go into other countries that have had revolutionary projects to help undermine them, to help come up with propaganda tactics that then come back over here and are conveniently placed right around the time when they want you to align with US empire and along these different things. So just to even localize it here more, like it's happening right where we live. So we're just going to do like one or two more questions and then we're going to kind of wrap up. Is there anybody else who would like to ask our incredible speakers a question? Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I want to say something after the question. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Oh, it might be too close to that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask because my father was in unfortunately he was in an ICE detention center. He got released luckily last Friday, and he's Cuban and he came in 1968, and he was I think he unfortunately couldn't make it today, but I wanted to ask just because he's concerned. He doesn't want to get his passport. I think he's concerned that because if he gets his passport that they will he's trying to remove a deportation that he has on him. So I don't know if there's any recommendation. I think he's trying to see if he can like possibly sue. I believe he said that he might have gotten the civil rights violated. I just, I think kind of, it was kind of, I guess it was directed towards Gabriella. Unfortunately, I didn't make it on time. I didn't hear her speak earlier. But if there was any like thing that maybe I think I heard that and through an interview on the radio station that potentially there's going to be like a branch of the Cuban Embassy here in Atlanta, hopefully in the near future. So just any advice on what he could do. I think he's trying to reopen this case. Unfortunately, in the past, I think it was like 36 years ago, he spent like 19 months in immigration. So, 36, years later, now he reported for immigration and, it's just unfortunate with everything going on. I was just kind of curious, so, what you guys, your thoughts on anything, situation. Whatnot.
Mm, okay. So I think that the answer here has two parts. The first is that if your friend, I mean, we do process a lot of requests from Cubans that live here in the States to renew their papers, to travel to Cuba, to have their passports. Um, the thing is that, I mean, we are always open that for our nationals to get their Cuban papers, to say it in that way, so they can have a normal relations with their homeland, with their country, the country that they were born. But it doesn't depend on us how the migratory policies work here in the United States. And we know for a fact that right now is a very complicated moment regarding that specifically. We have migratory agreements with the government of the United States. The first ones were in the 90s, and they have been evolving since then. We had other conversations during Obama administration. So, but the thing is that, I mean, I will have to see the specifics of your friend's case. But I mean, our embassy, our consulate, we have a consulate here in DC that receives, many requests of obtaining passports, of obtaining birth certificates in order to obtain the passports or other necessary papers. We have, facilities or facilities, no, sorry. We have measures in order to facilitate investment and participation in the Cuban economy of Cubans that live abroad and Cubans that live here in the United States. But I do understand why your friend is fearful in this situation right now. But remember that this is not a policy. I mean, the policy that he is fearful is not a policy that is coming from Cuba. Our policy has always been of approaching, of engaging, and with the Cuban community even more. This is one of our main, goals in foreign affairs, to deal with the Cuban community and to have a positive relation with the Cuban community that lives in other countries. And actually, some people here in the States, they say Cuban Americans. We call them Cubans. We recognize them as Cubans as well. but I will have to, I will be happy to receive more information about your friend case and assessment, but remember that we can only assess what depends on Cuba, not what depends on the United States. I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered your question, but this is what we have right now.
Thank you so much. I know, Elizabeth, you said you wanted to mention something.
Oh, yeah. When Gabriela said something that we used to say a lot, that we are not a threat to the United States, but after 20-something years, I realized that we are. We are a different kind of threat. We are not going to attack the US. We don't hate US citizens, but we're a bad example. You know, if we succeed as a revolution, we're a very bad example. If we can tell the United States that we can have free education and healthcare and housing and things like that, you know, that's a lot of bad business for the United States. They don't want that. So we are, and all the countries that try to do that and are close to the United States, you know, are always in problem, you know, and we are the bad guys. And I can tell you that, well, that's one thing. The other thing is that talking about how the propaganda says that our president in charge, she's just now pleasing Trump because, you know, it's like she's caving. Well, she's not, because, you know, her and her brother, who is the president of the National Assembly, they had their parent killed by the CIA when they were 5 and 10 years old. So it's not that easy for them to cave. You know, I can say that Chavez was less socialist than them. You know, they know what they want. They know what they're doing. And we trust because now we are being able to breathe. You know, we couldn't breathe. We were so pressed with the sanctions. And the thing that we're doing now, that, you know, like having money because we have contracts with not only with the United States, with different countries, selling our oil, that's good for us. It seems like we're caving. No, we're not. We're breathing, finally. Because we need money. We don't, you know, we need to put aside ideology for a while, because this revolution won't survive without money. Because all those free things that we think that are human rights are, and our constitution says so, they are not cheap. You need money for that. And the only way is if you can sell whatever you can have, produce, or, you know, whatever resource you have. We weren't able to do that because the United States didn't allow it. So we only could sell our oil or whatever we have to whoever the United States thought was possible. You know, it's like they gave permission. We're like in a schoolyard. And you know, what I think, that's my interpretation of the actual situation, is that as soon as we have enough contracts signed, better if they are signed with the United States companies, we're safe. Because in the United States, money rules. Yeah. So those companies, those corporations that have contracts with us, they won't allow him to destabilize the country or attack us or do anything, you know, like he would like, because they won't lose their money. So that's what I say, what I meant when I say our president, she is looking for our competitive advantage. You know, it's like, I know you need oil, I will sell it to you, but those are a tanker of oil. No, it's a contract for a long term. So when it's signed, well, that's what it, I don't know. And the other thing is for Jacqueline, that she's very welcome when she comes to Venezuela. I would like to meet her.
Thank you.
Me too.
Okay.
I will.
Can we wrap up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if I'm allowed, I'm sorry. Okay, so I just wanted to say that it's true. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that
Yes.
Elizabeth was saying something that is how the models of Cuba, of Venezuela, presents another way to do things that challenge the imperialistic way, that the imperialistic way of relations in the world that we see right now. And we have been, and for that we set an example for the rest of the world. And but the problem with the word threat is the the context in which it's used, and they are saying that we are a threat to the national security of the United States, and that we present an emergency to the United States, that at any time Cuba could I don't know, throw bombs in the United States, or allow or support terrorist organizations. Remember that we are included in this, unilateral list of allegedly state sponsors of terrorism. A country like Cuba that has suffered the consequences of terrorism in our own flesh, for over more than 60 years of CIA operations, terrorist attacks, direct terrorist attacks on a national country that were financed in US soil. So I do agree with what you said, Elizabeth, absolutely. I think that we set an example and that is dangerous, but I don't think we can allow them to call us threats, because we are not threats. We just present a different model that deserves respect, because of the fact that we are different doesn't mean that we are threats. And I think that at this point it's important for the people to make that difference, and to understand that difference right now, because the justification of the blockade, the justification of the list of state sponsors of terrorism, the justification for the energy blockade is precisely this political concept that Cuba is exactly, that Cuba is a threat, that Venezuela is a threat. And they are trying to present us that way to the world, even when the world knows that we are not a threat. So at this point, I think it's important to state that difference, because it means life or death to us. It means having a blockade or not having a blockade for us. And right now we are, the president has said that we are having some kind of conversations with the government of the United States. But even if we are having some kind of conversation with the government of the United States, that doesn't reassure anything. We are coming to the table with good faith, but it doesn't reassure anything at that point. And we need to keep talking about what is happening in Cuba, and what is this energy blockade is doing in Cuba as well. And also, conversations with the United States are very important at this moment, and give us a little bit, of not hope, but a little bit of, finding a reasonable path in order to find a solution to what is happening, because the conditions for our people are very hard in this moment. But I don't know. Sovereignty of Cuba is not, in the table of negotiations. It will never be, because
Venezuela.
I know exactly. And the thing is that we had, engagement of American companies in Cuba before 1959, and we had something that was named the Platt Amendment, that I can explain for forever what it was about, but was basically the dominance of the United States interest in the Cuban policy, and that was very dangerous for us. And it was precisely the reason why the revolution started in 1957, led by Fidel Castro. So we are living a very critical moment where doctrines like the Don't Row doctrine that they're calling right now are returning to the hemisphere, to our region, and we need to act together in order to stand against this.
Yes.
Thank you so much to everybody. I know we've ran a bit over time, but I also want to take one extra moment to thank all of our amazing speakers. I know people have said it was so inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll post this on YouTube.
Thank you. Yes, thank you all so much. This will be posted on YouTube, so everybody can go back and watch it if there was something you missed, if anything that you wanted to look at, or if you wanted to share it with other people. Yes. So that is under the Venezuela Coalition. We'll send the link out. You can reach out to us. Again, we have a sign-up sheet. We'll contact you by email, by text. Yes, thank you all so much. And like we mentioned before, this is a coalition of organizations. I see so many people who are part of organizations right now. So many people who are also fresh faces. And I would encourage everybody to, if you aren't involved, to try and get involved with one of the many organizations that are working, again, to strike at the heart of empire, as was mentioned earlier. And yes, thank you so much to everybody. Let me see. I don't think there's anything else to be said. Yes, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Viva Venezuela! Viva la revolución!
Hell yeah.
No compromise, no retreat.
No compromise.
No.